I'm back, motherfucker. See, during the Wild West, a lot of people that were not good at the least and just downright evil at worst got romanticized. They ended up having blockbuster movies made about them. Their accolades got spread via dime novels, which caused more people to want to do what they did. But there's a point where Old West characters are so evil and so irredeemable that they can't be romanticized. And so they're kind of left into the corner of history because nobody wants to make anything about them. Perfect example, the criminal gunslinger / serial killer, John Wesley Hardin.
Can't sleep, gotta clear my mind, that's fine, on time. I'll be chilling on the weekends with my friends. I'll be rhyming while I'm...
John Wesley Hardin was born in Bonham County, Texas, May 26 of 1853, to mother Elizabeth Cartwright Dixon Hardin and father James Gibson Hardin. Given that John's father was a Methodist preacher, he had named John after the founder of the Methodist Church, John Wesley. Being the second of 8 children, which, of course, in the 1800s was very common, John's life had become rather interesting and foreboding right from the jump. After his birth, the midwife of the family said that John had 2 paths. He would either be a great hero or a monumental villain. Given the title of the video, he definitely didn't become Gandhi. Now, given that John's father was a circuit rider, which was essentially the Old West version of a missionary, they had often traveled a lot, settling in different counties all across Texas. John's father decided to move there after passing the bar and deciding to teach school. Now, given John's origin of where he was from and the time period, it's no surprise that his family aligned with the Southern Reb and were more than supportive of the U.S.'s original sin of fucking owning people. How in the hell we were able to write the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and Thomas Paine's Common Sense and still be okay with fucking owning people beats me. But I digress. Now, while he did not fight during the war, John's father did get elected as a Confederate captain during the war. And I assume the reason he didn't have to fight is because he was a preacher. And mind you, the Southern sympathy was so strong in John's family that he tried to run off and join the Rebs when he was 9 years old. But of course, his father caught him saying, "You're about 4 years too young for that." Just 4, though. Now, mind you, 9 or not, John was already somewhat formidable at that young of an age because he was constantly hunting. He was constantly practicing, doing concert rifle drills, pistol range practice, the whole 9. So push come to shove, I would not fuck with that guy, even at 9. And with this being said, the main targets that John practiced with were the main targets that most young Southern boys practice with. Southern caricatures of Abraham Lincoln. That was his targets. Now, naturally, given who he was, John couldn't stand Abe Lincoln. He's even quoted in saying that he had seen Lincoln's characters burned and shot up in effigy so many times that he thought he was a demon. He was also quoted in saying, "Lincoln is waging a cruel and relentless war against the South to rob her of her most basic rights to own people." But now that we got the standard, he was a slave-supporting asshole from the 1860s out of the way, it's time to get to why you clicked on the video. All the evil and despicable things John Wesley did during the Wild West period. In 1867, when John was 14, he was attending the school that his dad taught. He was allegedly accused by a boy named Charles Slaughter of vandalizing the site of the school. The vandalism was a written poem focusing on a girl who attended the school, and it contained insulting content about her. Now, who wrote what? I couldn't find. Now, I couldn't get a confirmation of what the poem was about, but given John's age and it being about a girl, you can fill in the blanks. Now, John, of course, denied this, saying that it was John Slaughter, the kid who accused him of writing the poem, of actually writing the poem. Which, of course, made Slaughter very angry. And given that this is not only a story about teenage boys in the 1860s, it's about teenage redneck boys in the 1860s, of course it got life-threatening very quickly. After getting angry enough, Slaughter pulled out a knife that he was carrying around with him in school, because 1860s.
"I have a crossbow!" "Chris has a crossbow."
And he charged John with it, trying to kill him. But given Hardin was never one to crack under pressure and he was very quick-witted, he quickly got the knife out of Slaughter's hands. But unfortunately, instead of doing the same thing, which is chucking the knife away and holding him down and telling somebody or resulting in fisticuffs, no, he just started stabbing him. He just started stabbing the shit out of this kid. The injuries were so bad that Slaughter almost died because of it. But surprisingly, and I think this is because of nepotism, because of who his dad was, John didn't get expelled from school. And you think he would for the whole, almost killing somebody thing. This school fun. You know how it goes. But he did get severely reprimanded by his father. Now, granted, even though this kid did pull the knife on John and probably was trying to kill John with it, this starts a trend in John's life of him being provoked and taking a situation and being the bigger man or being smarter, instead just making it murderous in response. Because any way you talk to him other than how are you, he resulted with some kind of escalation. For example, at the ripe old age of 15, John committed his first of many murders. And of course, if you hear his side of it, they were all justified and the right thing to do.
Whoa! This is worthless.
In November of 1868, John had challenged his uncle's former slave, Mage, to a wrestling match, with some stories alleging that Hardin even won. Which, of course, the claims of him winning was from John himself. You're going to see a trend of lying from John, too. And, of course, every other story I could find from it was saying that John had lost the match. Now, why a harmless wrestling match with Mage ends up becoming so important in this story? Like I said, just those little slights was enough for him. Now, according to Hardin, what had happened next is Mage, the former slave in the very recent post-war South, had ambushed Hardin and was upset that he lost the wrestling match and was acting like he was going to beat him with a fucking stick or something, which led John to feel the need to act in self-defense and kill Mage before he was accidentally beaten to death or badly wounded, according to him. And wouldn't you know it, John being such the good Samaritan, after killing Mage or shooting him in self-defense, he had gotten back on his horse that he'd been beaten off of with the stick and rode out to get Mage help. What a nice guy. But, of course, there is another side of this story. One that I would refer to as the factual side of the story. Mind you, this was Reconstruction South in 1868, and John was a very racist person, and he couldn't stomach the fact that he was bested by a black man in a wrestling competition. So what's more likely is that he stalked Mage, watching where he was coming to and fro, to eventually the point where he stood behind a tree waiting on him, and then whenever he got his opportunity, he took out his dragoon and shot him, shooting him 5 times in the chest. Now, it is true that he got back on his horse and rode out to get Mage help, but I think this was a plan that he had made to secure his innocence. And he also thought that given this was 1860s Texas, no one would really care about the details of why John killed Mage, because black man, as well as the fact of John's family were considered like astounding citizens, but he was definitely wrong. Now, honestly, I think John would have gotten away with it, yes, except Mage didn't instantly die. He had managed to stay alive 3 more days and say his side of the story, and the story was just as I said, and so John would have to fight for his life in court. Now, mind you, this was the height of Reconstruction in the South, so the Union had to have their hands in all forms of government at the time. And because of that, John's father felt that John wouldn't have a fair trial in court, because he pretty much assumed that any white man that killed a black man at the time would be killed by the Union, because of the government's assurance to the freed slaves of their integration into the populace and into society, which I get, if you know a fella named Jim Crow, you can kind of see how that turned out. See, and when Mage died, 1/3 of Texas's law enforcement population was black. That was a guarantee by the government, as well as making sure that they had fair representation in court, so they were in the jury, I normally try my best not to deviate, like, from the main focus of these videos, but when you're talking about highly political people like John Wesley Hardin, you have to talk about what was going on in the time, or the story wouldn't quite add up. And while I don't know how John's father felt about the murdering of Mage, if he knew it was a murder, there was an understandable reason as to why he felt like John wouldn't get a fair trial, and they thought he was going to hang regardless. And so he gave him a horse, gave him a gun, and told him, "Hey man, go on the lam. We'll hide you out. But you can't stay here." So from that point on until a very long time, John was on the run all across the country. Now, mind you, whenever you talk about John's views of things at the time, it would paint a picture of him being stupid. He wasn't. That's a mistake. He was a man of his time, and he was actually very well educated. He was a good survivor, and he was built for the Wild West, so whenever he went on the run, he was living the life, Not to mention, when you add a guy who is very well trained in the law, given who his father was, he can read, write, plan ahead, quick to violence, had little regard for innocence, that's what you call a good criminal. For instance, a few weeks after the Mage murder, it was alleged that the authorities discovered where John had been hiding and sent 3 Union soldiers to capture him. Which at point, he had kind of one of those Walter White, I am the danger moments, and ambushed them and killed all 3 of them. And talk again about needless murders, he had been warned by a family member of his that they were coming after him. Yet he, instead of packing up and moving to another county for a while, he stayed and decided to get a few more kills under his belt. At 15, 4 confirmed murders. Mind you, this was his first month as an outlaw. And I will now read an excerpt from Hardin describing the incident. "I waylaid them, as I had no mercy on men whom I knew only wanted to get my body, to torture and kill. It was war to the knife for me, and I brought it on by opening the fight with a double-barreled shotgun and ended it with a cap and ball 6-shooter. Bro had the devil's right hand. Thus, it was by the fall of 1868 I had killed 4 men and was myself wounded in the arm." It's also alleged that locals, most likely some of Hardin's family, had hid the Union men's bodies about 100 yards from where the ambush occurred. Soon after the Union soldier ambush, John had fell in with an outlaw by the name of James Polk. See, James was on the run for a murder of a man by the name of Tom Brady, and they both hid out together around the Pigsaw area of Navarro County, Texas. See, a detachment of soldiers from the Corsicana area had successfully captured James Polk and were going to capture John, but he somehow managed to slip away. Which I assume it played out like this rather than instant bloodshed, because Polk was probably like, fuck no kid, we're not going to ambush this group of random dudes so that we can be in even more trouble, that have all our bounties fucking raised and have more blood on our hands. No. Or it could be whenever they saw the soldiers, they had saw that it wasn't a detachment of like 3 to 5, it was like at least 10, and they knew they'd be outgunned. One or the other, maybe both. And this comes to probably the funniest part of the whole story to me, and it shows just how lawless the Wild West was at this time. While John Wesley Hardin was on the run for 4 murders at 15 years old, he had managed to hide out in another part of Texas, change his name, and become a school teacher. Yes, he was a serial killer school teacher. Teaching in the Pigsaw and Navarro area both, just for a brief time. I still think it's funny, though, that this guy was in front of like a hall full of kids going, "Yes, sir, as you can see by the punctuation in this segment of Hawthorne's works," like the mass murderer teaching the school kids. That's just funny to me. I'm fucked up. I know, it's just funny. And yes, to the shock of no one, The reason why Hardin stopped being a school teacher is he allegedly shot somebody's eye out. See, like a lot of shootings in the Wild West, they occurred as a result of gambling. In this particular event, John was gambling a human life over a bottle of whiskey. Yes. So, essentially, what the bet was is he knew this random guy, allegedly, who said, "Hey John, I bet you can't shoot this random guy at fucking 100 yards in the fucking eye. If you can, I'll give you a bottle of whiskey." That was it. Yeah, he allegedly just fucking shot a guy's eye out because he was dared to, essentially. And, allegedly, he did just that. But, here's the thing. Do I think John would shoot a random person in the face over a bet? Yes. Do I think someone would dare him to do that? I don't know about that. Maybe. But granted, a lot of these people that he was hanging around with and daring him to do stuff were his family, and they were pretty fucked up too, you know. And while maybe not necessarily taking part in so many of the murders, they at the very least turned a blind eye in it, and at most were murderers themselves. For example, in 1869, John was with his cousin Simp Dixon. Simp Dixon, that's a name right there. Him and Simp Dixon encountered a group of soldiers, and for reasons I'm not quite sure of, he and Simp both killed one of each of them. It's also alleged that John had killed another black man in Leon County, Texas, around the second time he killed a soldier. John killed a lot of soldiers. Now, there's quite a few reasons why John would have wanted to kill the man in Leon County. For example, he could have looked at him wrong. He might have known who he was going to identify authorities. He might have beat him in a wrestling match, or he could have committed the crime punishable by death, according to Hardin, which was walking while black. Who knows? This next story, I think it was legitimately real, though. There's a lot more proof to it. See, on January 5th, I put 1970 there, 1870. John had allegedly been playing cards with a man by the name of Benjamin Bradley in Tawish Hill, County, Texas. Now, it's alleged that John was absolutely annihilating Benjamin and won damn near every game that he played with him. This angered Benjamin so much that he said he was going to pull out a knife and stab John in the liver with it if he won another hand. And then he pulled out a pistol with his other hand, you know, the not knife-holding one. I assume that he was figuring that John was cheating at the game, which I couldn't find anything about John being a card cheat, but let's be honest here, it's John Wesley Hardin. I wouldn't be surprised if you found something about animal sacrifice with him. So, at this time, probably because Benjamin was on like good terms with John decided to make a smart move of getting up and excusing himself from the situation. But even after he left the saloon, Benjamin allegedly still went out looking for John at night, which, mind you, if you want to talk like a guaranteed death sentence, it is saying some murderous shit to John Wesley Hardin. John Wesley Hardin, for once, giving you a pass, and you getting up to interact with him again. That's death row guaranteed. There's no wait, no judge, no jury, no nothing. That is instant execution. And, well, Benjamin, whenever he found John, he allegedly fired a shot at him and missed him entirely. You're fucked now. Then, John, doing a whiskey in the jar moment, pulled out 2 pistols and shot him with both barrels.
2 guns, bitch!
Which is no surprise given that 1, John was a terrific shot, and 2, he was known for being notoriously calm under gunfights. Probably because he was a fucking psychopath, but maybe though, who knows. He was a few sandwiches short of a picnic, that you can guarantee. He had managed to inflict not just 1, but 2 fatal wounds on Benjamin, with 1 bullet hitting Benjamin in the chest and the other hitting him in the head. Now, this incident there was no denying it. It was seen by dozens of people who confirmed the story, and it happened just as I said. Also, this incident does a good job explaining the way Hardin wore and used his heat that he was carrying at the time. See, this, of course, is a modern 1911 airsoft pistol, right? Like, it's not a real gun, just to make it clear to everybody. But I'm going to use this as a good way to show how he used his pistols and what he did with them from now on. See, his holsters were sewn into his jacket, right? That way the butt of his pistols would be able to face outward, right? And then he would do what was called a cross draw, which is instead of reaching like this, it's crossing your arms to be able to pull out your firearm. With John claiming, and being claimed by a few others, that it was the fastest way to pull dual-wielded pistols, and he would practice this technique every day. Which, given it's John Wesley Hardin, he did that cross draw on people a lot. Now, a man named John Moore, who I gather was a friend of the late Benjamin Bradley, had kept John's winnings, right, from the poker game, as well as a pistol that was Ben Bradley's, which he probably used as a gambling item, of which he refused to give John his winnings without Benjamin Bradley's consent. And given at this time Benjamin Bradley was pushing up daisies and dead men tell no tales, he could not get the consent from Ben to give his winnings. And wouldn't you know it, that problem kind of worked itself out for John anyways, because somehow Judge Moore just came up missing around that same time period, around the time that John got his winnings and left. John later claimed casually that he had killed 2 men in Hill County at that time, so you can kind of do the math there. So shit, how many killings are we at now? Like, alleged and confirmed, like 11? He wasn't 17 yet, so yeah, like 11. After the killing of Bradley, John alleged that a posse of 15 men came after him, and he somehow managed to capture a couple of them and take all their guns. In a smart bit to allegedly get the posse to stop following John, so to throw them off his trail, he told those 2 men to go back to the residence of which the other 15 posse members were, and to wait, and that he was going to come back for him with his group of guys, you know. And he never fucking did. He fucked right off. He left. He was later stated as saying, "I reckon they're still waiting for me yet." I can't deny he was funny. Evil, but funny. Later that month, on January 20th, in Horn Hill, Limestone County, Texas, John got into another gunfight at, of all places, the traveling fucking circus. Now, I'm not an expert on 1800 circuses. Maybe they had roaming gangs of bandits out there that were stealing the peanuts from the elephants and sticking up the crowds. I don't know, but I have a feeling it's more just the fact that John was an asshole rather than there was like a gang of clowns out there that were strapped to the teeth and out for blood. But I digress. See, it's alleged that he had gotten into a gambling dispute with one of the people working for the circus, which, what a shock. The situation became violent, and John shot the circus hand, fatally killing him. 5 or 6 days after this, John got into, you guessed it, another deadly encounter. On this occasion of bi-monthly murder, John had been accompanying a prostitute home in Cosi, Texas, where they were then confronted by the woman's pimp. See, the pimp had noticed that this prostitute didn't charge Hardin for her services, and maybe garnered true feelings for him. And in case you didn't know, giving it up without charging is a pretty big no-no in the pimping business. The pimp, being furious, demanded that him and the prostitute give him money for the lack of charged services. So John said, sure, no problem, and threw a wad of cash on the ground. Whenever the pimp kneeled down to grab the money, John did something that I think he enjoyed even more than banging hookers, which was murder. And he shot him in the face with his .44 pistol. Now, given that John was engaging in non-casual, very public, bi-monthly serial murder, it's no surprise that eventually enough people would catch wind of him. And if he was just a little bit more wise, he probably would have thought, hey, I killed a guy in this county, killed a guy in this county, and killed a guy over here. Maybe I should get out of Texas. But then he thought about it, looked around, and was like, no, fuck it. And so eventually he got caught. In January of 1871, Hardin was arrested for the murder of John Hoffman, a city marshal in Waco. However, this time he had actually denied the murder, which wasn't common for John. But with this being said, a common thing that John would do is if he couldn't find a valid reason for killing somebody, and he just did it to do it, he would just lie and say, no, wasn't me, didn't do it. When being arrested, he was transferred to this log jail in Marshall to await trial for the murder of the Waco City Marshal. He was in Marshall for the murder of the Marshal. See, here's the crazy part, right? Obviously, this isn't where the story ends, so he did escape the county jail. But the way he escaped it, I think is truly interesting. Like, he didn't do it Bill Doolin style, where him and a group of like 10 other prisoners overpowered the guard, which is the most common way someone escapes a jail. That's still how people escape jails. You know, he didn't even do it like real fancy dancy, like John Dillinger style, where he made a gun out of like wax and made like a fake gun out of wax to look like a real one, and then managed to get a real gun from a guard and then leave. No. He just cut out the middleman. Somebody just smuggled a gun in for him. Yeah, I don't know how he managed to get a cap and ball Colt by one of the prisoners, but he did, and he escaped with it. See, and here's the thing to me, right? Like, what kind of trick fuckery does it take to get in contact with a prisoner who, one, has access to firearms, and two, hadn't already broken out with one of those firearms? Why was he still there? I don't get that. But Hardin felt that for some reason the Marshall jail just wasn't quite safe enough to break out with. It was safe enough for people to smuggle guns in there, and easy enough to do that, but he still, for some reason, didn't want to take his chances, so he decided to break out while he was in transfer. Now, 3 Texas state policemen by the names of Captain Edward Stakes, Jim Smalley, and L.B. Anderson were tasked with transporting Hardin to Waco. Now, even though Hardin's words really are nothing to go by and are untrustworthy, it is claimed that Edward Stakes and L.B. Anderson were actually fair and decent men, whereas Jim Smalley was more of the LAPD circa 1991 kind of guys. According to Hardin, they tied him on a horse with no saddle for the trip. See, while the group made camp for the night, Stakes had left to procure food for the horses, while Smalley was tasked with watching Hardin. And according to Hardin, Smalley quickly began taunting Hardin and even beat Hardin with his pistol, with even Hardin alleging that he had been beat so badly that he had bursted out crying, asking for Smalley to quit beating him. At this point, Hardin then cuddled up to the horse that was bareback for protection to quit from getting beat with the pistol, but while being protected by the horse's flank, he pulled out his secret pistol. Swiftly executing Smalley for being a dick, he got on Smalley's saddled horse and rode the fuck out of there. Mind you, with this being said though, there's a few other aspects of this that are important to mention. While yes, they were transporting him via a barebacked horse and camped out at night, in Freestone County, the abuse story doesn't quite check out. An important detail to mention here is Smalley was black. He was a black officer. And John felt slighted by any man in general treating him like he was less than him. But a black man who had authority over him, that was enough to make John murderous. And while the other guards went out to get fodder for the horses, John pulled a string that had a pistol under his arm that he was hiding and got the drop on Smalley. And instead of having Smalley get in his own cuffs, having Smalley run away, he just murdered Smalley. So maybe there was an abuse story, maybe not, but Smalley was a black man, and I don't think John would tolerate any kind of authority treatment by a black man to him without him wanting to kill him. Now, given how allegedly murderous John was anyways, it's pretty likely that he would have killed Smalley either way. The fact that he was a black man, that solidified it. Also, soon after this, Hardin alleges that he may have killed 3 mysterious men who had captured him in Bell County, claiming that they had camped out for the night and gotten drunk, and they did what men do when they get drunk, and they got careless, and he managed to kill them and escape. And as you know, careless lawmen around John Wesley Hardin usually end up, well, dead. But given that there was nothing in the Bell County newspaper about this, or anybody identifying any people like this that had been killed at the time, it's very likely that this is another one of Hardin's tall tales. Allegedly, after the Bell County shootings, Hardin went and hid out in Pilgrim County with his cousins, the Clements. And while in South Texas, it was Hardin's cousins who gave him a suggestion that probably saved his life. See, they were cattle drivers that were known to make drives up the notorious Chisholm Trail, and while yes, they definitely were not legitimate, it was pretty hard for the law to keep up with them, and so they thought it would be perfect for John. Which, in the words of Sharif...
Yeah, Kane, you should come too, man. I mean, you're not doing nothing out here but getting yourself in a lot of trouble.
Now, if you would like to understand why being a cattle driver is perfect for someone if they're trying to evade the law at the time, you can go back and watch my Bill Doolin video, but I'll give you the cliff notes so you can be up to speed. Moo people brought money to trail towns. Given the police did not want to get trampled, they did not want to approach the moo people. Not to mention, if the police did want to start going after the moo people, they would have to start having to go after all of them. And considering there was a lot more illegal cattle drivers than there were police officers, they knew they couldn't do that. So they tended to just stay away from, 12 to like 3,000 head of cattle and people that were in trouble 2 states away. They didn't think the juice was worth the squeeze, because it wasn't. Now, mind you, given who Hardin was, it's not really that much of a surprise that his exterior family members were rough characters themselves, and their cattle driving and ranching wasn't fully legitimate. While yes, they did do honest work, like I said, running the cattle up the Chisholm Trail, they also had a habit of stealing the cattle that they drove up north. And personally, given the type of person Hardin was, I feel that if he didn't know they weren't at least semi-illegitimate, he probably wouldn't have gone along for the ride. Now, surprisingly, John was made trail boss of his first drive in February of 1871 up the Chisholm Trail. Mind you, the Chisholm Trail started in South Texas near San Antonio and ended around different parts of Kansas like Dodge City and Abilene. Abilene and Dodge City being in like the top 5 most notorious Wild West towns in all of Old West history, for very obvious reasons. Also, sometime in February 1871, before Hardin had even finished preparing for the journey up the Chisholm, Hardin and the Clements gang had camped up with some Mexicans while they were playing Monte. Well, Hardin, not even knowing how to play Monte, had played enough with the Mexicans to start winning. And at this point, given that it was later in the night and with the application of spirits, you can guess whenever Hardin started winning how he would boast about the win. And in typical Hardin fashion, he declared very loudly and boastfully that he won by slamming his cards on the ground and going, "Pay the Queen." Well, the dealer of the game, for reasons I couldn't find, had allegedly looked at Hardin's possibly legitimately earned money and said, "No." So you can take a wild, and I mean wild fucking guess what Hardin did. Now, how the fight had happened, I couldn't find if it had happened at all. The truths on this story being legitimate are mixed as well. But it seems as though Hardin drew his gun first, but possibly just to whack the dealer over the head with the gun. Also around the same time, the dealer had gone for his knife, which led Hardin to abruptly shoot him. See, really what I think had happened is the dealer had gone for his knife, and Hardin went for the split reaction of buffaloing the dealer over the head. Now, if you don't know what buffaloing is, it's essentially pistol whipping the shit out of someone, Red Dead Redemption 2 style. At which point, another Mexican went for his gun, and Hardin quickly turned the gun on him and shot him. Someone else in the scuffle had ended up breaking their arm. How this happened, I'm not quite sure, but my best guess is he was going for one of his weapons and somebody in Hardin's crew shot him. That's just my best guess. When the dust had settled, the card game left one man with a concussion, another with a broken arm, and another being shot, most likely fatally in the lung. And according to Hardin, him and his League of 1870 supervillains had left the camp laughing their asses off about the whole affair on their way back to where they had been staying. And according to Hardin's very trustworthy and very legitimate opinion, some of the best men in that area told Hardin that they were glad that he shot those men, and the men that were harmed by him definitely deserved it. So you can take that for whatever that's not worth.
If he tells you snow is white, he's lying!
Also, very soon after this event, Hardin had allegedly gotten into another violent altercation. This is actually known because the guy that Hardin had harmed actually worked for Hardin. See, Hardin had noticed a freed slave by the name of Bob King trying to separate one of the mature beef cows out of the herd. Now, why he did this, I couldn't find. But given this was like right before Hardin's herd of 1,200 were going to be sent up to the Chisholm, it was probably the brand The Stolen Cow. But Hardin had felt this act was unnecessary and allegedly demanded Bob to not try to cut the cow out of the herd, saying that he had been given strict orders to not let anyone get near the cattle. He allegedly was like,
Fuck you, Dad!
fuck you think you is, man? Motherfucking Ron O'Neal or something?
And felt that he did not need permission to do such a thing. And Bob was like,
fuck you, Jack!
Demanding to speak with the alleged trail boss. Hardin told them, well, as a matter of fact, I am the trail boss, and you cannot cut into the herd. Well, Bob, putting his best I'm fucking with the wrong guy and I don't realize it outfit on, said, fuck you, and went in to cut the cow anyway. Now, surprisingly, you would figure that the next sentence coming out of my mouth is, then he proceeded to shoot Bob in the face, given that Bob King said some of the worst things you can ever say to John Wesley Hardin, not even mentioning the fact that he was a former slave. That would just boost John Wesley's ridiculous reason of shooting somebody. This time around, John refrained from shooting him. I think it's because he knew that sending cattle up the Chisholm Trail on drives like this was the best way for him to lay low, and he didn't want to fuck it up. No, instead, John just did the very sane, very normal act of pistol whipping the shit out of Bob, to the point where Bob was begging John not to kill him. Now, personally, I still think that Bob had a 4-leaf clover, a rabbit's foot, maybe had some holy water thrown on him and he didn't realize it, because tempting the fates that much with John Wesley Hardin isn't something people tended to do and live to tell about it, but maybe it was the first reason, I don't know.
This was divine intervention.
Anyway, sometime around early March of 1871, Hardin and the Clements gang began their drive of 1,200 cattle up the Chisholm. And in typical Hardin fashion, if he was going to be a violent asshole in one state, then by God he was going to do it in Oklahoma too. Like when he was staying 2 miles south of Cornhill on up the Chisholm Trail with his relative Marna. See, one of the reasons they were staying at Marna's is everyone besides him and Jack Clemens got a bad case of the measles, and they needed to be nursed back to health, that way they could continue going up the Chisholm. And while there was a troublesome white steer owned by a neighbor of Marna's that kept getting mixed up in Hardin's herd. And given this is John Wesley Hardin we're talking about, he handled the restless steer in the same way he would handle any fucking thing else, with a gun. I mean, fuck it, in his eyes, you're gonna treat humans one way, might as well treat the bovine the same. And he shot it right in the face. Now, he had claimed that he didn't mean to kill it and had aimed for the cow's nose and not its eye. That doesn't help your case, John. You still shot a cow. And I mean, to be fair, the steer did stop causing trouble after that. I mean, it's pretty hard to cause trouble whenever you aren't breathing anymore. And in one of the few times of Hardin actually owning up to his mistakes, he had actually gone to court and paid for the landowner's losses with the dead steer. And like I said earlier, a year prior, Hardin wouldn't have even considered doing that. He'd have just up and left. But he had a good thing going, so he kind of did the right thing. I mean, he paid for the animal that he shot in the fucking face, so I mean, good job, bro. After recovering from the measles, the crew continued on their trip up the Chisholm whenever they encountered a vicarious group of Mexicans who were also cattle herders. Now, the reason why I say vicarious is this group of cattle herders had the strange need to constantly be real close to Hardin and his group and make sure that their cattle was really close to the Hardins. Basically, they were trying to take advantage of a large amount of cattle being driven and try to cut some of Hardin's herd out and into their drive. Hardin, feeling the need to have a word, approached one of the Mexicans on horseback. I assume this Mexican was the trail boss, but I couldn't get a confirmation. And after some exchanging of words, and this is John Wesley Hardin, so probably the final words was, "I'm gonna fucking kill you," the Mexican, for a reason I couldn't find, felt inclined to pull out his shooting iron and shoot Hardin in the head. Luckily for Hardin, the bullet only hit the brim of his wide-brimmed cowboy hat, and then Hardin, being very accustomed to gunfights at this point, pulled out his 1860 44 caliber revolver. But given, like I said, he had been in many a gunfights at this point and been on the road a long time with that revolver, the cylinders did not fire. And mind you, Hardin didn't have another gun on him at the time, which wasn't a normal thing for him to not keep a spare for obvious reasons. Now, if it wasn't for one, his quick wit, and two, Hardin's firearms knowledge, then in the words of Jules from Pulp Fiction, Hardin's ass would be dead as fried motherfucking chicken. But Hardin managed to make the split-second decision to hop off his horse, hold the pistol cylinder steady with one hand, and pull the trigger with the other. Now, given Hardin is still human, and that story is like straight out of a spaghetti western, that's a fucking wild story. He only shot the Mexican in the thigh, but that was enough to incapacitate him. And the Mexican had the very smart wherewithal at the time to be like, all right, look, I'm done. I've had a fill of whatever the fuck you've got going on. I'm just gonna hobble my ass away. You can stay there. I don't want no more. But given this is John Wesley Hardin we're talking about, and the moment you give him any inclination to use deadly force, he will use it. He pulled out his pistol and killed the limping Mexican, which on this kind of thing you can argue maybe what was a bit more justified given the situation that occurred, but still it's pretty fucked up. After Hardin shot the man he was beefing with in the head, the rest of his gang got into a full-scale gunfight with the other Mexicans. And of course, in Hardin's typical fashion, he later allegedly exaggerated the story, saying that 6 Mexicans were killed at the end of the battle, and 5 of them died by his hands. But as far as we know, this isn't true, given that there were only 3 Mexicans who were for sure in that area at the time that were involved in the shooting, and only 1 confirmed to actually be by his hand. Now, of course, not all of Hardin's interesting stories on the cattle drive involved him shooting people. As I can attest, Oklahoma is rich with all sorts of game. You know, antelope, turkey, deer, I mean, you name it. We have bears in some regions. And, of course, John wanting to take advantage of this and having a lot of off time, given that 1870s cowboy's pretty fucking boring, he took up some pretty good opportunities to get some hunting in. And so Hardin hunted everything in Oklahoma from turkeys to antelope to wolves. And for those who don't know, which I didn't know until researching this, Oklahoma in the 1870s had a pretty good population of both red and gray wolves until being completely exterminated, like a similar event being the buffalo slaughter that happened around the same time period. See, and that's the thing, every time I'm on like a 2 or 3 hour drive to like OKC or something like that, and I look out and see this vast open prairie, and I just know that 150 years ago was crawling with buffalo that I could hunt, and now they're all gone, yeah, makes me pretty pissed off. The reason I bring this up is wolves turned out to be a pretty big issue for Hardin's party of lunatics. When they would slaughter a beef cow to eat, there tended to be a pack of wolves that would stalk the fresh kill, and the Clemens party began getting concerned of the wolves attacking them. So according to Hardin, for reasons I don't quite understand, he saddled up and rode out to capture one of them with a lasso. After shooting it, mind you. Well, he got lucky and managed to do just that and shot one in the leg. And instead of being halfway sane and putting it out of its misery, he lassoed it to his horse and rode it into camp. Well, given his camp had a no-wolf policy, according to Hardin, they shot its rope freeing the animal. Yeah, I'm gonna call cap on them shooting the rope. I mean, like, that's possible to do and people have done it. But no, they probably just ran up and cut it with an axe or something. But back to the story of the wolf, Hardin commented on it by saying that they had gotten wolf fever and decided to go after the wolf, and I assume put it out of its misery. Did they find the wolf? I couldn't find. See, part of the reason I bring up Hardin's hunting escapades is during this period, just like anything else in his life, he ended up getting involved in a deadly confrontation due to hunting. The first instance is whenever John was turkey hunting along the Canadian River. And luckily for him, he had shot a pretty nice tom. Well, after heading to his camp with the gobbler, a native that had stalked John had noticed what he had and shot him with an arrow. When returning to camp with the gobbler that he had shot, he was actually stalked by a native, of what tribe I couldn't find, and he had actually fired an arrow at John. John quickly did what he did. He turned around and successfully killed the native. And then him and the Clemens gang very quickly realized, okay, if there's one native, there's going to be 20, so they buried the body. Which on this, I can understand, because, he shot him with the arrow. He shot the arrow at him first, and they wanted to keep their scalps attached to their heads. But given this is John in 1870s Indian territory, this wasn't the first and only encounter that he had with natives. The second instance occurred when Hardin and his homies were in Bluffs Creek, Kansas, mostly through their drive on up the Chisholm Trail. On this instance, another group of natives, in this case who were allegedly Osage, had been strong-arming cattle drivers to pay 10 cents a head for cattle. Which, mind you, 10 cents a head with 1,200 head of cattle, adjusted for inflation, that's like $5,000 today. And I figure you can kind of see where this is going. John and the rest of the party weren't so inclined as to pay, making it very clear that they weren't going to. The natives, as a response, said, okay, if you don't pay, we're going to kill your cattle. And they began cutting their cattle out of the herd. John and the Clemens boys responded, "Okay, we're not going to pay, and we're going to kill you." So, another fight occurred. While John was away, the rest of the camp was asleep, and when they awoke, they noticed that their scalps had still been on their heads, but a group of natives were rummaging through all their shit, of which they took all of their valuables, including John's silver bridle. When Hardin returned to see his missing bridle around 10 a.m., he quickly decided, well, looks like Osage is back on the menu, and decided to go out and gun for the Osage again. Biding his time, John's luck finally struck gold, and out came 20 natives to snatch more from their herd. Well, when he rode toward them, he had noticed, what a shock, one of them had his silver bridle. After spotting this, he had commented that he had liked the bridle the Osage brave was carrying and offered $5 for it. When the native attached the bridle to John's horse, John then stated that was his bridle and that it was stolen that morning and wanted to know exactly who took it. After stating this, the native allegedly grunted and tried to take it off of John's horse. John then abruptly told the native to quit fucking with his bridle. The native refused. Bad idea. He kept trying to get the bridle off of John's horse. John pulled out his pistol. Pistol whipped the shit out of him again. There needs to be a tally of, I'm not even like halfway through his story, and I think we're at like 3 times John has pistol whipped the shit out of somebody. Or buffaloed him, whatever you want to say. This of course led to the native calling some of his group over to Hardin's side of the herd. After having backup, the group demanded even more cattle as retribution for the buffaloing. Hardin at this point, reaching peak engine fatigue, had stated quite simply, no, you are not taking any more of our cattle. Of which point he pulled out his pistol to set in stone what he was meaning. Out of the native group, an extra brave proceeded to pull his iron out and pointed it at one of the cows, saying that if he wasn't allowed to cut the cow out of the herd, then he was just going to shoot the damn bull right there. With which Hardin just said, "Oh really?" and quickly pointed his pistol towards the head of the extra brave, swiftly stating that, if you kill this animal, I shall kill you. And in another episode of This Guy Doesn't Know Who He's Fucking With, the guy probably thought Hardin was bluffing and killed the cow. And yeah, you know what happened to it. One less engine. And mind you, this event, like most of his events, Hardin had in writing. And this is probably one of the funniest quotes I've read from Hardin's writings. When talking about the incident with the extra brave, he just simply said, well, he killed the beef. And well, I killed him. Just, there we go, simple as that. He shot cow, I shot him. I told them what I'd do, and I done it. And at this point, the natives all started looking around like, hey, you know, we kind of made our money here. And right now we've only lost one brave, and if the rest of these cowboy guys are half as loony as that one crazy-eyed motherfucker, we're gonna start losing more. So they packed up and fucked right off. They're like, we're good. you white men from town, go back to town. We will leave you alone. Then finally, after 3 long, hard, murderous, bloody, and ridiculous months on the Chisholm, the gang had finally made it to Abilene. And you would hope, and in a lot of cases it would be true, that, oh, well, this is where the story gets less boring. But this is John Wesley Hardin we're talking about, and it's never boring with John. It just continues with more murders and ridiculous stuff. But I find it best that we break this up into 2 parts for you guys. That way I can get this out quicker so you guys can have some more content. I'm sorry about the delay, guys. I know it's been a while. Just had a lot of stuff going on. I've got a new kind of format as how I'm making these videos, so they're going to come out faster and just as good quality, I promise. Please, make sure to check out my music. I've got it on 35 different platforms, Spotify, YouTube, SoundCloud, fucking anything, really. I don't even know all the stuff I have it on, not going to lie. But yeah, I hope y'all enjoyed it, and don't murder people over looking at you wrong, and have a good day.